Hi, Ryan Black here with Smoked Barbecue Source, and today I'll be reviewing the second generation Weber SmokeFire. I've had the first generation for about a year now, and today I'm going to take you through a walkthrough on the second generation, talk about any differences there is between them, and get into the goods and bads of having a Weber SmokeFire. So let's get to it. Okay, now we're going to go for a walk around of the Weber SmokeFire. Keeping in mind, guys, that at any time you're welcome to check out our website, or we'll try to include a link below of more in-depth information and the full write-up review of this second gen SmokeFire. So now the things that we're going to go over now are what are the differences between a first gen and a second gen Weber SmokeFire. Did Weber actually fix the issues that most people saw with the first gens, and then talk about the general goods and bads of having a Weber SmokeFire. So just taking a walk around for a second, you know, the first thing that you're going to notice is this is not a brand new grill. This is not a showroom floor grill. I have grilled multiple things on this so far. I've seared steaks, chicken, you name it. I've cooked 60 or 80 plus pounds of pork Boston butt barbecue on it. We've grilled some pork ribs and whatnot. So this thing has definitely been through the paces. I have cleaned it some, but I have not cleaned it excessively, so you guys will get to see what some of those buildups look like with the pellet dust on the inside, the grease system that we'll talk about, all that good stuff. Looking down here, just to give you an idea, you guys can kind of see what that looks like with some of that pellet dust coming out. Here's some of the pellet dust on the inside as well. And as you can see, yes, there is some quite a bit of pellet dust in here, but you'll notice that there's almost no grease in here. You'll find out a little bit later as to why that is the case in a while. Okay, going down my list here on fixed issues. The first, probably number one issue that most people with Weber SmokeFires have had is the pellet bridging / feeding issue. So just describing to you some of those guys that don't know what that is previously on the first generation machine, there were times that these pellets would actually, make sure you guys can see that, would actually bridge in this hole right here, and they would not feed, basically causing a pocket on the bottom side going to the auger system, which would cause your fire to go out, and you would have no idea as to why. The other issue is this ramp right here. So this is a new addition. This is something that they put out for the second gen, but they also released this exact same fix for the first generation grill too. So in a little bit after we get done talking about this, I'm actually going to go show you my first gen machine, and you can see how it's holding up as well. This was a fix they released for the first gen and they sent to me free of charge. It comes automatically standard on the second gen machines. Basically what it does is it increases the angle of this ramp right here and allows the pellets to feed better. Previously, before that, this actually came out significantly further, and this ramp was much flatter through here. I'm happy to say that that has fixed the pellet feeding / bridging issues. I've ran this multiple times, including all night long for about 9.5 hours without touching it, and the pellets were feeding just fine the whole time. So I was happy to see that they did that. Again, at the same time, this isn't necessarily different than the first gen because they did release this. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The improved ignition function. Now, I don't necessarily have anything to show you on that as far as the grill goes, but the gist of that was sometimes during the ignition startup process, it wouldn't necessarily heat the glow plug for long enough, and so sometimes the pellets would not ignite. It would start to smolder but never ignited, and then your fire would never really get started and it would go out. The main frustration or issue with that is one of my bads that I'll talk on later, is the fact that you cannot bypass the startup or shutdown modes of this SmokeFire whatsoever. It has to go through a very specific startup mode, and it has to go through a very specific shutdown mode. And if something gets interrupted, if you turn it off, if you unplug it, whatever, as soon as you turn it back on, it will give you an error message and say, the shutdown has been interrupted. We'll now spend the next 15 to 20 minutes shutting down, even if you have absolutely no fire going and your grill is cold. As you can tell, that is one of my major frustrations with this, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Improved app features. You'll see some of that in the write-up. I don't have my phone with me, or I would show you that as well. The great thing there is some of the features that Weber initially promised when this grill came out, they have finally actually updated, such as the smoke boost feature, where you can set it on the controller and it will actually, either by your phone app or by the actual grill, and it will drop the temperature as low as it can. I've measured anywhere from like 165 to 180, and basically it drops the temperature significantly low, and it will smolder the pellets and cause it to smoke quite a bit more than it normally does. That's something that I really like. I really enjoy that feature, but that was something that was promised but did not come out with the original first gen grill. In fact, actually, I don't think it was actually available till about 4 months or so ago. What else have I got on here on fixed issues? The max temperature. So on my first gen machine, from the very get-go, Weber promised that this grill would get up to 600 degrees max temperature for searing and whatnot. 600 degrees is a pretty good temperature for searing steaks or whatever. The biggest issue I had was on my first gen, it would not physically reach 600 degrees. Many times I even let it run for 2 hours on wide open, and the max temperature it ever got to was about 560 degrees. Now, while 560 degrees is not necessarily bad for cooking, or even for searing somewhat, if you pay this kind of money for a grill and it says it gets to 600 degrees, it ought to get to 600 degrees. What they did on the second gen, and coincidentally they sent me the same parts for the first gen during that first year, was a brand new auger system and a firmware update on the grill. Between the combination of those two, I'm happy to say that I've been able to hit 600 degrees every time within a reasonable amount of time on this grill and my first gen. So those were the main issues between a first gen and second gen. There is one more issue, that would be the grease trap system. Now, as I said, I purposely left this this grill dirty and have not cleaned it because I wanted you guys to be able to see kind of what that looks like. So bear with me for a second and I'll take this apart so you guys can see kind of what we're looking at. Okay. So as you would expect to see, you know, you've got drippings from various foods, steaks, fatty grease, whatever. That's fine, that's normal. Here's the fundamental problem with Weber's greasing system, and they know it's a problem too, and they know that there's not much they can do about it without a massive redesign. Here's the problem. The intent is that grease will drop down to the bottom of the barrel here, and it will make its way through this little grease channel. You can't see it, but there's a little engraved grease channel that goes all the way into this hole, and that drops down into here. Now, that sounds great in theory, but here's the problem. You see all this weld dust right here? Or not weld dust, excuse me. The pellet dust right here? All of this comes out of this burn pot. So here's the cover for that. You can see pellet dust on it as well. There's your pellets, and this is basically what I've left in there from last time. All of this pellet dust gets in there and it lands all around this hole, and it mixes with the grease and it gives you this, and it hardens. And this happens relatively short amount of time, and because that, the grease never really makes its way into this hole because it mixes with any grease that drops from the food or juices that drops from the food. It hardens and it makes a paste. Gives you an idea right here. Now, here's the reason, here's kind of the reasoning for that. The way that a Weber SmokeFire works is, the intent here is that as these pellets turn to dust, they will fall down in the ash pot below. The problem with that is the way they have the fan system set up, it's literally blowing air back up this way. So more than enough of this pellet dust actually blows up out of here and into this barrel chamber, and that's why you have so much dust in here. Out of all of the pellet grills that I've tested, believe it or not, this seems to ash more than any grill that I've had. Now maybe it has to do with the size, maybe it's the shape or whatever, but what I can definitively say is other grills I've tested do not put this much pellet dust in an area where there's grease as well. You'll notice like on Pit Boss, Traeger, Louisiana, or whatever, most of them have that big metal diffuser plate that goes over the top of this that diverts the grease to the side and basically separates the pellet dust from the grease. Unfortunately, kudos to Weber for trying something different, but at the same time, I mean, you can see that it clearly does not work. Although Weber never necessarily concedes this, they basically make indication of this in their videos on their website, because they actually make mention that due to fatty meats and stuff like that, they actually recommend putting a aluminum foil pan right here just underneath the grill to catch grease. Well, if the greasing system worked very well, then you wouldn't necessarily have to catch grease. Technically, I believe they did that because there have been some people that have had grease fires because of that heavy grease and I guess the fires. Now, I had one grease fire on my first generation, but it was not while smoking. Basically, I had smoked some Boston butts, which had dropped a lot of grease down into the bottom. And then after I finished doing the smoke, I actually cranked this thing up to 500 or 600 degrees to try to let it burn off some of the grease. Well, when I did, it actually caught the grease on the fire, or the grease on the bottom of the barrel on fire. So that's technically not my fault, their fault. But I think there's enough here to say that they took a good shot at it, but the greasing system just doesn't work as designed. So moving away from that, those are the only differences that I have found between the first gen and second gen Weber SmokeFire, are the things that I mentioned there. With that said, I will say this: all of those differences, or all of those issues and fixes, they all came from the first gen machine. I suffered through all of these problems with the first generation. Now, Weber's customer service did take care of their customers and send them fixes as they fixed them. They sent it all free of charge. I do find it a little bit frustrating that they decided to use their customers as guinea pigs to essentially do all of their durability and quality testing. Obviously not all of them, no, that's probably a little harsh, but still, it was obviously rushed to market, and there were things that they had to have known about, and they just sent it out anyway, saying that they'll fix it later. Now, with that said, let's get on to the actual goods and bads of this. We've talked about the bads a little bit, but we're going to talk about them a little more in depth. Some of the goods: the pellet sensor. There is a pellet sensor incorporated right here with the second. This is on the first gen and the second gen SmokeFire. So right now I'm just talking about the Weber SmokeFire in general. To date, as far as I know, this is the only pellet grill that has a sensor. So it will alert you on the grill by beeping, and also by your app, and send you an alert indicating that you are low on pellets. I think that's fantastic, and I think that shortly that will become the standard for every pellet grill out there. I think they'll all come with a pellet sensor. That just makes sense that they would do that. Second good I've got on my list, the actual grilling and smoking accuracy. I'm going to brag on Weber here for a little bit as far as that goes. The grilling and the smoking ability of this grill is fantastic. This is one of the most accurate and one of the most tightly controlled grills that I've run into. When I'm smoking, for example, and I set it on 225, at most the biggest deviation that I saw was about 8 degrees. So basically plus or minus 8 degrees from the set temperature of what it's actually reading in this grill on the display versus what I'm seeing actually right in the middle of this grill. That's absolutely fantastic for something that is still considered a live fire. With that said, unlike some other pellet grills, this grill actually smokes constantly. Because of the variable fan control on this and the smart controller it has, it ramps up and down to keep the smoke flowing. But it's not a lot of white smoke or something like that to the point where it turns the food bitter. It has a thin bluish white smoke that comes out the back vents the entire time I'm smoking with it. I absolutely love that. It's fantastic. I love the accuracy, and I love the flavor that I'm getting from it. As I mentioned, is another good, the smoke boost. That didn't come out when the first gen was released as promised, but they did eventually get to it, and it's definitely a feature that I use a lot. So you can set the grill on whatever your typical smoking temperature you want, such say 250 degrees, but you're cooking some Boston butts and you want to heavy smoke them for the first couple hours. You can hit the smoke boost button on either the grill or your app, and it will drop the temperature of the inside of the grill down to about 170, 180 degrees, and it will boost that smoke. There will be quite a bit more smoke come out of it than normal. Now, we're still not talking about rolling just a ton of white smoke or black smoke or anything like that, but it does seem to enhance the flavor of your food. So I very much like that. On the grilling side of things, same there. I mean, as you can see, this is the EX6 model, but there is a lot of room for burgers here. When this is my go-to grill when we're having parties, or actually, obviously my first gen model up there. When we have parties or we have big family get-togethers or something like that, this is my go-to grill because I can cook a lot of chicken or a lot of burgers at one time on this. Along with that, I'm going to add the searing capability. Being that it will hit 600 degrees every time, just like it was supposed to begin with, it's absolutely fantastic for searing steaks or something like that, or even burgers. I think I've cooked up to about 26 or 28 burgers at a time on this grill. Absolutely fantastic. So I'm very happy with that. Now, well, I'll get to the bads on that in a minute. The pellet chute, it has a quick drop pellet chute right here, and that comes from this pull lever. I'm not going to pull it out now, but it basically drops out of the bottom. It's always nice to have a pellet chute so that you can change out your pellets relatively quickly to a different flavor. I do that quite often. Here lately, I've been using some charcoal flavored pellets to do most of my steak and grilling with, and then I'm swapping between hickory, apple, and cherry for most of my smoking stuff. Something else that I want to mention also that is a like of mine is the add-on shelf space, and I want to make sure that I differentiate that. This does not come with the grill. This is an add-on. This is an add-on extra, and the side shelf as well. This is kind of a good and a bad. So the bad is when you first buy this, you don't get those pieces. So the only food prep area you've got is this, and personally I find it pitiful. It seems to be the smallest of any grill smoker combo that I've actually run across, and that's kind of a bummer. I think the intent is Weber wants you to buy these pieces. I will say this, the front shelf is absolutely worth the money. It does cost quite a bit extra, but to me it should have come standard. It doesn't, but it is what it is. These pop up and they will fold into place so that you've got this much more added room to be able to put stuff. So when you bring your food out here to be able to put it on to start smoking it, or you're taking it off and wrapping it or whatever, these right here are fantastic, and I have used the heck out of these. Believe it or not, I actually like this so much. I bought this for my first gen grill, and you'll see it here later on, myself, because I liked it as soon as it was available. Now it just so happened that when I ordered this grill, we ended up getting this and this with it so that we could test all of it at the same time. But I did order this for my first gen grill, and it's been worth every penny. The side shelf, I'll say a couple things about the side shelf. The side shelf, it feels a little flimsy, but it does seem to hold up well. I mean, realistically, I think these things are only meant to hold like 15 to 20 pounds max. So you're not talking about a lot of weight here. And obviously you can see there's a nice area to put stuff. If you only have the money for one, I would absolutely say go with the front shelf. The second shelf is really more of a luxury. If you're wanting to order a Weber SmokeFire and go all out, I would say absolutely go ahead and grab the side shelf as well. Outside of that, I felt it to be a little bit expensive for what it is, and I think your money would be best served with the front shelf if you don't have it already. Okay, moving on to the bads list. I mentioned the grease drain system already. Guys, I'm not sure there's anything else more to say here. I think anybody, if you've read any reviews, if you read my last review on the first gen Weber, you'll find that it's been an issue since the get-go, and there's not a heck of a lot they can do about it. What I will say, and let me grab one of these grates. What I will say is, due to the fact that the greasing system doesn't work, if I am smoking something that has a lot of fat on it, for example, like a Boston butt, I would absolutely recommend putting a thin aluminum foil pan wherever you put the butts, and then sit this on top of it. I ordered a bunch of aluminum pans that were, you know, this thick, and covered almost this entire area and sit it underneath. The smoke still gets around it just fine. It doesn't hurt anything, but if you want extra peace of mind to make sure that you don't end up with a grease fire or something like that, I would highly recommend you doing so. With that said, I will say that I have done it both ways. I have smoked Boston butts, a bunch of them, 3 or 4 at a time, where I had a lot of grease in here at 225, 250 degrees on my first gen, and I never had an issue with it catching fire. With that said, you will end up with a bunch of grease pellet dust paste in the bottom of this sucker if you don't use those drain pans. So if you're considering a Weber, or you definitely want one, that's something I would highly recommend to you. One of the other bads I've already mentioned, the small shelf space. So obviously this is all you get, unless you're willing to order more. So that's still on my bad list, because this doesn't come standard. Unfortunately, that's all you get. I mentioned the searing as a plus, but I'm going to go ahead and mention it as a bad as well, but it really pertains more to pellet consumption. Because of the way that Weber does this, all of that 600 degrees is coming from the fact that it's loading the fire pot down with a lot of pellets, and it's basically churning through pellets as fast as it can to keep up that 600 degrees in this large amount of space. Because of that, the pellet consumption on this is the second highest consuming grill that I have tested to date. It chews through a lot of pellets, so that's kind of the downside of having one that will hit a high temperature that also happens to be this big as well. So that's something that you just need to consider if you're looking at one this size. And again, this is the EX6 size. Obviously, if you were looking at the EX4, it would be a little bit less, but the fact that all of that heat's coming from the fire pot, versus like a bunch of them have where you have a slide out rod on the side, and it exposes slits in the firebox right above it. Obviously, it just makes sense that you're going to be able to get to a higher temperature faster if you do that. So they decided to do something a little different here. Absolutely nothing wrong with it, just a little different design, and goods and bads from it. I mentioned this one once already, the startup shutdown mode, and it really pertains more to the shutdown mode than the startup. As I mentioned in my write-up as well, and I go into more detail about it, the frustration is if for whatever reason your fire goes out, you accidentally run low on pellets, and there's a gap in the auger where there's not pellets coming out, you lose your electricity. You happen to be cooking, smoking with it, you're in the middle of a smoke and 2 a.m. in the morning, your electricity blips out for 3 to 5 seconds. Which actually happened to me while I was doing a late night smoke with this. When I come back out here, it gives you an error message, and it says that the grill was not shut down properly, and it will now spend the next 15 to 20 minutes shutting the grill down. So you're in the middle of a smoke, or in this case you could be grilling burgers, you could be in the middle of a party, whatever, and this grill absolutely will not let you bypass that. You can physically turn the power switch off on the bottom and turn it back on, which on almost every other grill will start from fresh, like nothing ever happened, like you just started it up, and you can go from there. Not on this one. This one recognizes that you did not shut it down the way that it wanted to be shut down, and it will not let you bypass the shutdown mode. That absolutely frustrates the fire out of me, and I hope that somebody from Weber ends up watching this video sooner or later and they do something to fix that. I can't imagine that I'm the only one having a problem with that. All right, that brings us to my last bad that I have for this. This is actually one that did not show itself immediately, but actually came with time, and it's this pellet death valley in here. So what has happened is, unlike most other pellet grills, you only have about 5 inches or so of this narrow pathway to put pellets in the back. And if you're like me, I keep all of my pellets in a sealed 5-gallon bucket. So I'm sitting here pouring these into this top here, and I get pellets that will fall into this pellet death valley right through here. I don't know if you guys can see that from the video or not. I think so. This is such a frustration because there is no good way to get these dang pellets out. And as you can see, I've got a pretty good buildup on this one, and I bet you'll see it when I show you my first gen machine as well. But the only way I have found to get these pellets out is to get my portable compressed air tank and literally blow them out, because I can't really get even a paintbrush or something like that is not narrow enough to get down in here. And so you can see how these have grown. This is a slight concern for me because I'm hoping that these pellets never actually catch fire. Now luckily they never have, so it doesn't seem to be an issue there. But it's a little bit of a frustration because I feel like Weber could have done something to address this, but instead this just becomes a bit of an annoyance or frustration for the customer. So I just want to make mention of that as well. It's not the end of the world, and like I said, obviously there's a way to clean it, but more often than I thought, I have actually accidentally dropped pellets in here while trying to get them in here. I've tried pouring pellets from the backside. I've tried pouring the buckets this way. You usually end up either dropping it here or you end up dropping it on this other side. And I did not realize until I'd started using this for a while how this was kind of annoying versus most of the other smokers that have the Pellet Chute and hopper system here on the side, where it's a nice big 14 or 16 inch square. I don't recall ever dropping a single pellet on those styles. But then here I've got this one, and you know, you can see even on the ground here where I have dropped some at times. I think there's some even here on the edge of the patio where I've kind of brushed them off to the side. But so anyway, we're here at Smoked Barbecue Source. We try to be brutally honest with you. We're not here to convince you whether to buy a grill or not, just give you real world experiences on what we see with these various grills, smokers, and devices, and arm you with the knowledge to make the best decision for yourself. So that's what we're doing here, and just letting you see brutally honest all of the goods and bads. It's time to fire it up for you guys and let you see the interaction in the display here. So you'll find the master power switch is just on the bottom side here. Flick it on. SmokeFire screen comes up, tells you roughly what it's measuring inside ambient temperature right now. So we'll, per the instructions from Weber, we'll go ahead and open up the top lid, push on the button, turn the dial. Let's see, I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys its smoking ability, and we'll go from there. So I'm gonna set it at 225, push the button once more, and I don't know if you guys can hear that, but you should hear the fan ramping up. So the fan will actually ramp up and down. I think it's probably just going through some general checks and protocols prior to running, because obviously there's no fire going on yet, so it doesn't need a fan. The auger is running, so we'll hear some pellets dropping here shortly. But once it gets up and going, I'll show you guys what that looks like. All right, you can see that it's reached 225, and I'm going to turn around here and see if we can give you a good view. This right here is what it looks like. This is roughly the smoke that the SmokeFire puts out pretty regularly. There's a good and a bad here. You can see, number one, that this is obviously smoking decently well. I don't know if you can see it in the video or not, but you can see it in person. Obviously you've got a little bit of a gap here, and you've got some smoke coming out through the edges, and the top side as well. So I mean, you can see some smoke coming out there. I would personally prefer that did not happen. I wish they would put a fire seal in there. But you can see that it is coming out the back as well quite a bit, like it's supposed to. The other thing you can see here, and you can actually see the pellet dust build up and some of the paint starting to fade away. You've got that heat and that smoke, regardless of the temperature, whether it's 200 or it's 600, blowing right down on this powder coated surface, and it fades the paint away almost from the start. I really wish they didn't do that, but as far as actually looking at the smoking function, you know, you can see that it actually works quite well. And here's it running at 600 degrees. Okay, just so you guys can see a fair comparison, this is the Weber SmokeFire first generation edition. So I didn't take this cover off on purpose so you guys can see it. This grill has sat outside since basically the day that I put it together, fired it up, went through the break-in process, and this cover has been on it since then. If you have grills that sit outside and you've bought any cheap crappy covers at all, you will know how quickly these things break, rip, tear, etc. And so, you know, I want you to take a look at this and see, and as you can see, that this cover not only fits quite well to the SmokeFire, but it's made out of a soft, I'm gonna say rugged material, pretty tough. I mean, it's not super thick, but it's fairly tough. It's woven thick. I don't see water coming through it when it rains out. The edges are sewn fairly well, but I mean, as you can see, you know, it's not brittle. It's obviously still nice and flexible. The Velcro on it is still very good. There you can see it's a little dirty, but it's still in fantastic shape. So if you're wanting to buy one of these grills, you absolutely need to cover it with something. This is not going to be your cheapest cover out there, but it does work very well, and it seems to be standing the test of time. So we'll go ahead and take this off so you guys can take a look at it. As I mentioned previously, and you can see that this one is a bit dirty too. I do a lot more grilling and smoking than I do cleaning. Not near as much as I should, but I tend to pay more attention to how clean the inside is versus the outside. So you'll see that my my grates are not quite that bad in here, but you will see, let me move these grates. You can see quite a bit of dust down in here as well. So I actually just finished up a pretty big smoke with this just recently, and this is kind of some of what's left from that. So just to give you guys an idea of, you know, there's nothing much different here between the first gen and the second gen. So, but everything along the grill seems to be holding up fairly well. You know, you're gonna get some dust buildup like that. You're gonna get some buildup like this, which all of this just brushes right off. It's actually about time for me to do my annual maintenance on this and cleaning all of this extra carbon off and whatnot. But as I mentioned, I've been very happy with these front shelves. If you don't get a side shelf, this is the handlebar that you get instead. Just a side support. You can move it around with this, obviously. Let's see. Open up the back. Here you can see that this is that add-on shelf again. If you look kind of closely, you can see, I don't know if you may not be able to tell that from the picture, but you can almost kind of see where that ramp is different underneath than it is on this. So this was one of the things that Weber issued to us to fix this issue. You'll see that I took this finger guard off. Initially, I actually at one point in time, even after putting this ramp on, ended up having an issue with bridging, or at least I thought I would. So I left it off. Personally, I don't think that it needs it at all. If you stick your fingers down in there while this thing is running and get them caught, you're an idiot. If for some reason you're feeding something other than pellets in here, like a tree limb or something like that, you're also an idiot. So I don't feel like it's necessarily needed whatsoever. I know why Weber does it. That's kind of a cover your butt kind of thing. I end up taking stuff like that off almost all of my grills so that I can manipulate it as needed. There are times where I have stuck my fingers down in here and moved those pellets just so I can finish burning out the rest of the chute and then change to a different color. Now, something I wanted you to take notice of as well is the pellet death valley that I mentioned. So I blew this out not too long ago, and you can see that even since then I've still got I've had new pellets that have emerged that have dropped in there. So this is something that's just going to be an ongoing issue if you buy a Weber SmokeFire. Just kind of one of those things that you'll have to deal with. As I said, you're going to find nuances or isms with any of these grill smoker combos. So whatever you get, you just need to make sure that whatever isms or nuances they have, you're willing to live with. Just so you can see this as well, same here. I cleaned the outside off, but the last time or two that I've smoked it, but ultimately you're going to end up getting this pellet dust on the outside as well. It's just inevitable for this SmokeFire. Every grill that I've used, I've gotten some pellet dust on the outside, but this one seems to be significantly more than most. And as you can see here as well, you know, some of the pellet dust does make its way inside, and including where the grease is supposed to fall, but you almost never see any grease in here. I suppose if you had a really fatty meat and you were grilling with a high temperature, you might get some grease to go in there before all of the pellet dust got to it. I guess that's possible. The other thing that I wanted to show you guys was, you know, this part right here, right on the back. Now, this is not an issue of Weber's. There's a lot of grills that have this issue. You will see this pellet dust and this carbon buildup on the back side of their lid, along with anywhere that they have vents. So in this case, this is a little bit frustrating, and you may need to consider this as well. These vents, which is blowing hot air and smoke out, are blowing directly on this paint. So if I wipe this off, you can see that over time it's basically corroding the paint off of this because of the heat and the smoke coming off of that. There's absolutely not a darn thing you can do about that. Why in the world that these weren't maybe moved up a little bit further to prevent that is beyond me. So again, I think that's one of those things where Weber made a boo-boo, or they rushed this into sales without really doing much durability testing. Now this up here I've seen on most grills, not all of them, but most of them, where this lid is not completely sealed to the barrel, and because it's not, that's where the smoke is escaping. Obviously, as you close this grill and it gets pressurized, it's looking for places to escape, and it comes out through here. This is one of those things where, me personally, I believe that all grill manufacturers could put a fire seal here all the way around instead of leaving it like they do. I'm a little disappointed that they don't do that. I believe all of them should, to basically that fire seal that will close that off on the interior of the box for the lid. I was actually surprised the other day. I was at Lowe's and I saw that the latest Pit Boss Elite Platinum actually had that. They actually went through the effort of putting a fire seal all the way around, which tends to mimic what you see on most of your commercial smokers and tournament grills and stuff like that. So I was very excited to see that. That's something that I've been preaching for a while, and I hope that other grill brands will catch on to that and they will follow suit. So, final thoughts. Should you buy the Weber SmokeFire 2nd generation? You know, it's a fantastic grill. As I mentioned before, when it comes to performance, they do a great job of grilling, a great job with smoking. You can't go wrong there. But you have to be willing to deal with some of the serious quirks that it has. You know, there are some things that this grill does fantastic, and there are some things that they still haven't gotten right yet. Along with that, I would say that before you make a decision on a grill, if you're considering one in this price range, this size, I believe you also owe it to yourself to take a look at, say, the Camp Chef Woodwind, the Louisiana Grills Black Label series, the Traeger series. I mean, there's several out there competing in this class, and the field is getting more and more busy, more and more cluttered. But you're starting to see more and more features show up, and higher performing grills as well. So while I can't tell you outright whether the Weber SmokeFire is for you or not, I think you owe it to yourself to at least consider those other grills along with this one and see what fits you best as far as features, performance, and the things that you're willing to deal with. No matter what grill you get, none of them are going to be perfect, and they're going to all have little nuances. So that would be the best advice I could give you. Thanks for tuning in.